Hello friends and welcome. Today's video is a sew along for Simplicity 8947 and we are going to make view B but with the sleeves and neckband of view A. The supplies and tools that you will need are going to be pins, scissors, and matching thread. So let's get started and don't forget to like and subscribe if you found this content helpful. Okay, so we're going to be making Simplicity 8947 and I am going to make view D, which is what the model is wearing here in the pink, but I want the band from view A, which is here, and I also want the sleeves from view A. So I'm going to show you the pattern pieces that you need to use to make that view. So you're going to need pattern piece number 1, and this is the front, and you're going to cut this on the fold. And what I'm going to do, because there's several cutting lines, because I want to cut out the length for view D, because I'm going to be adding a band, I'm just going to fold this over on the cutting line for view D, and I'll just pin it in place so that it doesn't come loose, so that when I cut my fabric out, it'll be the right length. You're going to need pattern piece number 2, and you're also going to cut this on the fold, and this also has the same situation as far as the cutting lines. So I'm just going to fold this one to the cutting line of view D so that I don't cut off too much fabric. You're going to need pattern piece number 3, which is the neckband for view A. You're going to need pattern piece number 11, which is the lower band, and you are going to cut this on the fold. You're going to need pattern piece number 5, which is the sleeve band for A, and you're going to cut 2 of these. Lastly, you're going to need pattern piece number 4. You're going to cut 2 of these, and because I'm cutting out the sleeve from view A, I'm going to fold this on the A cutting line so that I don't cut out too much fabric. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut out my pattern pieces. I'm going to clip my notches and mark my dots and get it ready for being sewn up. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut this front piece out now versus just cutting out the front and second on the fold at the same time, because I want to make sure that my little diamonds match up, and that way when I cut this out I can match it up with the other back piece, so to make sure that they line up properly. Okay, so what I did to make sure that my diamonds were going to line up is I laid out my pattern piece, and I just laid the front piece that's already been cut out next to the back piece, and I made sure that these notches lined up so that I could see where the diamonds placed. That at first the pattern piece was up here, but because the diamonds did not match up when it was up higher, I just went ahead and moved my pattern piece a little further down to where it would match up the diamond cuts here and the diamond cuts there. I hope that makes sense. Now we're going to cut out our lower band, and we're going to cut 2 of these on the fold. Now I'm going to cut out 2 of the sleeve. Okay, so now I'm pinning down the sleeve band, and we're going to cut 2 of them, and not on the fold. I just have it on the fold. And then lastly, we are going to cut the neckband. You only cut 1, so I've laid my fabric out flat. You just cut 1, it's a rectangle, and then we can start pinning our pattern pieces together. Okay, so the first step that we're going to take is we're going to take our front pattern piece, and we're going to take our back pattern piece, and we are going to lay them right sides facing together, and we're going to pin at the shoulder seams. And just remember, before you start attaching your pattern pieces together, make sure you have transferred all of your markings and you have clipped your notches so that you know where everything is supposed to line up. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to go sew across those shoulders. So we're going to sew these shoulder seams down at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance with a zigzag stretch stitch. So now that you have stitched your shoulder seams together, it should look something like this. And I did off camera go to the serger and serge those edges because I just wanted a clean finish. You don't have to do that with knit fabrics, which is what this pattern calls for, knit fabrics, because they don't fray. However, I just prefer that look. So now that we have stitched our shoulder seams, we're going to go ahead and pin our sleeves. With right sides facing, we're going to go ahead and pin our sleeve to our dress, and then we're going to stitch it down with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now that the sleeves are attached, it should look something like this. And what I'm going to do before I sew the complete dress together with the sleeve and the side seams is I'm going to add pocket. So I already have like an extra template of a pocket, but you can just get one from an extra pattern or draft one yourself. And what I did is I just went ahead and pinned the pockets to the dress, and what you're going to do to attach it is just pin it a 1/2 inch under the waistline marking, and actually the waistline is the notch that's up here, so just measure a 1/2 inch, pin your pockets, and go ahead and sew them down. Okay, so now that the pockets are attached, I'm just going to go ahead and flip the dress over so that the whole dress is right sides facing. It should look something like this. I'm going to go ahead and pin the sleeves together. I'm just going to pin the whole dress together, and then we're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew it all the way up with the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now that you have finished sewing up your front to your back, it should look something like this. Spread out. Looks more like something like this. And at this point, it will be a good time to finish your raw edges if you have not done so already, especially if you don't have a pocket. You can just go straight from the arm all the way down without having to worry about this, but I do love pockets, so I wanted to add it. So we're going to put the dress off to the side for a minute, and we are going to sew our sleeve bands together. And so what we're going to do is we are going to fold the sleeve band together right sides facing on the edge that has the notches. So this way, up and down, it does not have the notches. The notches are here, so that's how you know where you are going to sew. So I'm just going to fold this over, and I'm going to pin. And then we're going to take these to the sewing machine and sew these down at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All that we're going to do is sew a straight stitch all the way down. So I'm not going to do that on camera because you probably know what a straight stitch is already. So just go ahead and do that to both sleeve bands, and then I'll meet you back at the table. So now that you have your sleeve bands sewn down, we're going to go ahead and trim the seam allowance. Now that the seam allowance is trimmed, it should look like something like this. So now what we're going to do, we are going to fold the sleeve band in half lengthwise with wrong sides together and raw edges even. And then we're going to pin. And this is what your sleeve band should look like. This is what it's gonna look like on the finished end and raw. So now we're gonna move on to our lower band. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna open our lower bands out, put them together right sides facing, and stitch on the edge so that it could be one circle or one attached piece. So now that we have sewed our seams together, I went ahead and trimmed them, and then we're just gonna go ahead and fold up the band all the way around like this, matching your notches, and we're gonna pin. So now that this is all together, it's a good time to go ahead and try it on just to make sure the fit is okay. After you try it on, make sure that the fit is okay. We're going to take the band and we are going to pin it to the bottom of the dress, and we're going to match up our notches with the notches within the band, and we're going to match our seams in the band with the seams of the dress. So once you have your band attached, it should look something like this. And then I went ahead and finished my raw edges with the serger. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take it to the iron and give it a good press. Okay, so now we are going to move on to the sleeve. And what we're going to do is we're going to make basting stitches all the way around the sleeve, and then we're going to make another basting stitch 1/4 of an inch away from the first basting stitch so that we can gather the sleeve end to fit. Make basting stitches for the sleeve. So this here is what your basting stitches should look like. And so now we are going to gather these stitches up so that we can put our sleeve bands on, and it will be the right size. Okay, so now that we have pinned our sleeve bands to our sleeve, we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew these together. So now that we have the sleeve band attached, it should look something like this. And when you flip it inside out, it should look something like this. So now we're going to work on our neckband, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fold our neckband right sides facing, and we're going to stitch across the short end. So now that we have our neckband sewn, I went ahead and trimmed the seam allowance, and we're going to flip this to where it, just like we did the bottom band, to where it's wrong sides facing, and we're going to pin all the way around. So now that we have our neckband pinned, we are going to pin this to our dress neckline with right sides facing, and we're going to match up our notches with the notches that are in our neckband, with this seam being in the middle and the back. And there are also 2 dots that you should have marked, and those dots should be placed on your side shoulder seams. So now that we have it all pinned, it should look something like this, and we're going to take it to the sewing machine and just sew all the way around. After you stitched your neckband to your dress, you should have made another stitch a 1/4 inch away from the original stitch. I did not do that because I knew I was going to serge my edges, and that stitch would suffice as the second stitch. But if you don't have a serger, go ahead and make a second stitch to make it secure. Then you're going to trim your seam allowance, press it down towards the dress, and we're going to now go to the sewing machine and make a top stitch all the way around this neckband. All right, so now that you have your neckband top stitched down, you are all done, and it's time to show off in your new dress.